Man, there's been a lot of NFL news over the past 36 hours or so. We have 3 DraftKings contributors here to kind of break it down for us, give us a fantasy spin on it. Pearce Dietrich, Steve Buchanan, Geoff Ulrich. Good morning, gentlemen. The legal tampering period has begun in the NFL. Plenty of reported moves to discuss. Let's put a fantasy or maybe a sportsbook spin here on some of the biggest headlines right now. Ooh, Geoff, Mitch Trubisky to the Steelers. How much do you love this? What's the fantasy impact of it, dude?
You know, people can joke around and you can make fun of me all you want, pal, but it's a pretty big impact, man. I mean, you look at what the Steelers, what did they do? Their offense just looked terrible last year. They brought in this guy, Matt Yes, you Canada, to implement his college scheme and do whatever, and it looked terrible. But why did it look terrible? Well, he uses a lot of motion, or he likes to use a lot of motion during, you know, the pre-snap routine. And that's all great, but none of that works when you have an absolute statue at quarterback, because nobody is afraid of the quarterback who can't run and can't throw it more than 10 yards. So you bring in Trubisky, a guy who can run a little bit. You know, again, go back to Canada's, college or Canada, however you pronounce it, college resume. He had a guy in Chandler Harnish, over 3,000 yards passing, 1,000 yards rushing. I don't think Mitch Trubisky is going to hit 1,000 yards rushing, but I do think you'll see him rush more than he has at any point in his career. I just think it's a very good spot for fantasy purposes. Regardless of what you think the Steelers are going to do next year, I think this division is a little bit more up for grabs than people think. And yes, let's talk about the sports book. Everyone's mad because the Steelers' odds went down, or the Steelers fans are mad because their odds went down after they signed Trubisky. I think the Steelers are a good bet at plus 650 to win the division right now.
All right, Pearce, despite a few flashes there, like he did struggle to be a consistent fantasy option during his time in Chicago, but this is 100% an upgrade in the passing game for Pittsburgh compared to the past couple of years.
It definitely is. With Roethlisberger, as Geoff mentioned, he had a statue back there, but not only was he a statue, he would just go with his first read every time and would just quickly pass to the first guy, short routes. He had very limited upside. You feel like you got half of the offense with him at quarterback. Now things are going to be open up, and you know it could go both ways. You're going to get Trubisky taking more chances, and they could lose more games, and there could be more turnovers, but you're going to have a lot more upside. And one of the angles I like is Matt Corral is a first-round draft pick, supposedly, and one of the comparisons they say for him is Mitch Trubisky. So this is basically like drafting a first-round pick and having an experienced first-round pick, also keeping your first-round pick. Trubisky, 29-21 over his career. That's a pretty good number. 93 quarterback rating in 2 of 4 seasons. We give this guy a hard time. I don't know why we expected him to become a Hall of Famer, but he's been a solid quarterback, and Pittsburgh's definitely going to compete in the North.
All right, Steve, what do you think here, dude? I also know the next question will be if the Steelers can even build an offensive line to protect him.
I mean, that's very important too, but now, I mean, this is how low the bar was set when everybody is singing the praises of Mitch Trubisky. What an upgrade for this offense. Mitch Trubisky is in the house. The guy who's been a backup for, 2-3 years now, it feels like that's how low the bar is. But then you look at the contracts too. Mitch Trubisky is signed through the next 2 years. The other 2 quarterbacks on this team, which is Rudolph and Haskins, are both free agents after this upcoming season. So it feels like this is going to be the guy they're going to. I mean, they can absolutely sign one of those 2 guys, obviously, if things go awry with Trubisky's time with the Steelers, but this feels like the guy they're going to go to. It is an upgrade, but again, the bar is so low. I mean, it's at my shoes. That's where the bar is. I just need to pick it up slightly and we go, the bar has been raised. It's not much to go by, but Trubisky is, like Geoff mentioned, he's going to give them a different dynamic that they've had before. Roethlisberger was such a statue back there. Trubisky will at least be able to run the ball a bit.
Geoff, which of the Jaguars' moves is the best one? Which is the best move the Jaguars made yesterday? And you got to think Trevor Lawrence is a happier man today than he was yesterday.
So, I mean, I guess he is. I don't know. I mean, is it really did they really upgrade that much after spending all this money? I mean, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. Are we just bringing in different types of broken toys? I don't know. But the best signing, I think, was Evan Engram. Evan Engram is a player I have been high on since the Giants signed him. The Giants he's partly been his own problem because he hasn't been able to stay on the field. But last year, I mean, or really actually over the last 2 years under Joe Judge, I mean, they just did not use him properly. This is a player who's got very good downfield speed, and his height and size can let him win jump balls over smaller cornerbacks. The Giants barely used him in that regard. You look at what Trevor Lawrence did. He targeted the tight end a lot last year. I think bringing in Evan Engram on a one-year contract, that's the big thing. It's a one-year contract. They didn't give him like half the city like they did to Christian Kirk. So I think Evan Engram is the best signing out of all those moves that they made. You know, I'll let the other guys handle Christian Kirk because, I mean, I don't even really know what to say about it. But I think Evan Engram was the best signing the Jaguars made. I think he could be a legitimate fantasy, guy you should be targeting as it's kind of like a sneaky sleeper next year for tight ends.
Steve, how much of an improvement in year 2 do you expect from Trevor Lawrence?
Well, I mean, when he actually has some players around him, like, again, the bar is down at my shoes. You don't have to pick it up much to say things are better. But let me just say this, okay? I 100% agree with Geoff. So I'll go on the opposite side. The worst deal that they did was Christian Kirk. Yeah. Like, are you kidding me? To make him have the 6th highest contract amongst all receivers in the NFL. Think about that. The 6th highest contract amongst all the receivers in the NFL. This is somebody who hasn't even eclipsed 1,000 receiving yards in his career. Could he get that in Jacksonville? Maybe, but that's when you pay him after the production has been, shown that he can be that type of guy. And then you have Kirk and Zay Jones on the same team. Like, those two are clashing each other. They're basically the same guy. They're both downfield threats. Like, they're not going to mesh well together. So confusing moves should be, par for the course in Jacksonville. I was a fan for 1 week. I needed them to get the Colts out of the playoffs. They did that. I took my fandom, and now I'm out because I didn't like half the moves they made. Evan Engram, great move. 1 year, prove it deal. That works. Everything else, what's going on here?
I know. Pearce, I believe we have you on record here. Like the past couple weeks in the show, I think at one point you said you were going to take the Jags to win the AFC South, and I think the Super Bowl may have even been in that conversation as well. You got to be feeling great after yesterday, man.
What the hell, Pearce?
Yeah, I definitely feel a lot better. Now, none of the moves are great. These were all good moves. Now, the thing with Christian Kirk, you have to overpay him. Like, you have to overpay if you're Jacksonville. No one's coming to Jacksonville unless they get a good contract. But what Jacksonville is signaling by overpaying is convincing not just their fans, which they needed to do to tell their fans, hey, we're committed to winning. It tells other role player free agents that, hey, maybe this is the spot for you. Come on in. We're building something here. But probably the best move was to get the guard that they signed, because now that gives them even more flexibility with the draft. They may not need to go after Evan Neal. They can probably go after Aiden Hutchinson, or they can trade down and then continue to upgrade in a bunch of different spots. And if one of those receivers doesn't work out, that's fine. They've got plenty of weapons, plenty of options. I think that they have a whole deck of cards that they're working with here, and they're in a really good spot this early in the season.
Do they have plenty of weapons, though? Like, I keep hearing this how great this Jacksonville wide receiver core is.
It's like Steve.
I don't see it. I mean, it's the same as last year. It's the exact same group as last year. It's just different names.
No, and they're all richer. They're all making more money, but like Steve said,
okay, good.
Down in his shoe. Down in his shoe. That is where expectations are. You've won 4 games total the past 2 years.
They're heading to practice in Porsche 911s instead of Chevy Impalas. Let's give them that.
Wow.
All right, guys. One dude who will not be receiving the football from Trevor Lawrence, that is DJ Chark. So he signs a 1-year deal with the Lions. Steve, was there no market for this guy? And what do you think his fantasy value is going to be with Detroit, now catching balls from Jared Goff?
Well, put it this way. If there was no market for DJ Chark on a 1-year, $10 million deal, then I don't know what half of these NFL teams were even thinking. Like, that feels like a steal for somebody who has tremendous upside. But that upside is now going to be capped because he's going to be catching balls from Jared Goff, who just doesn't throw downfield at all. He threw downfield at one of the lowest rates in the league last year. 9.1% of the time he was going downfield of 20 yards or more. That doesn't exactly suit the kind of player that DJ Chark is. So that's going to cap his upside tremendously. But that being said, he instantly moves up to the wide receiver 1 in this offense because they have probably the worst group of receivers in the NFL last season. So there is some upside there with that, but it doesn't particularly go to the game that DJ Chark likes to play. He's not going to be one of these guys that's going to be catching these short early downs, or maybe he's going to have to if he at least wants to get the ball, but that wasn't the team that the Lions were last year either. They ran the ball one of the highest rates on early downs, so kind of confused by the move. And if that's how limited Chark's market was, it's really puzzling because there's a lot of teams, hello Green Bay, that could use another receiver.
Okay. Geoff, how do you feel about this one?
Pretty similar to Steve. I'm a little bit more optimistic. Like, I do think the Lions potentially, I think they're just going to be a little bit better last year. I mean, we did talk about this team a lot, mainly Pierce. during the regular season, and they were probably better than their record indicated, right? And Jared Goff, once upon a time, had a pretty good connection with guys like Sammy Watkins and Brandon Cooks downfield. Now it's a different offense, but the targets are going to be there. Like if Jared Goff is throwing downfield at any game next year, it's going to be to DJ Chark, because Amon-Ra St. Brown essentially becomes the underneath guy, and he did last year, and he's good in that role, I think. But Chark will be the player stretching the field all games. And if the Lions are running the ball a little bit better and they're just a little bit better team, there's going to be more open looks, more one-on-one situations for Chark. So it's a great risk-reward signing. It's like the exact opposite of the Christian Kirk signing. It's a perfect risk-reward upside signing. You can get away from it quickly if you want. You're not setting up this guy up for huge failure either. He knows he's coming in. He's got to prove it. You're not giving him all the money up front like you did with Kirk. So I think Chark could be very sneaky next year. Potentially, especially on DraftKings for DFS. I mean, this player is going to probably go off a couple times with those long touchdowns.
Yeah, Pearce, Pro Bowler in 2019, and on your Lions, the Lions that you said, pretty much a 500 football team? Maybe they'll be a winning football team this year.
Super Bowl champions, actually, I'm pretty sure, like 2022.
This is going to sink then. If you are signing Jaguars castaways, that's not a good look. I mean, if anyone knows if he's still got it or not, it would be the team that he played for. And if they say, nah, he doesn't have it, and they let him go, then he probably doesn't have it. If they're willing to go with Kirk, then I think Kirk's probably the better option. He's not a good receiver, and this is not a good team, even though they were pretty much 500 still. That's barely 500, we'll say now. But you look at his 1 year, that 2019 Pro Bowl season where he caught 73 passes, over 1,000 yards. The Jags were a 6-10 team. They were always playing from behind. They were always in pass-heavy scripts. They were often playing against softer coverage because they were losing. You look at him over the course of his career, he just really hasn't done much. I'm sure, like Geoff mentioned, there will be weeks where he'll be relevant, just like Amon St. Brown was relevant several times, especially in games where Detroit's getting blown out, even though they did keep it close half the time. But I'm not excited about this. This is completely irrelevant to me.